Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Deeg. This is Deeg Thoughts. Today we're talking about symbols in virtual worlds, and two symbols in particular that I care about. Number one, Sulfuras, the Hand of Ragnaros. Who's Ragnaros? I'm glad you asked. Ragnaros is the final boss of Molten Core, the first and I think most important raid instance in World of Warcraft. It was the endpoint of a long ass journey. That's what it is. It's the endpoint of a long ass journey. From level 1, level 40 getting your mount, level 60 hitting max level, getting into the dungeons, going into the Black Rock depths, and eventually entering the raid with 40 other fucking people. It takes a community to take down Ragnaros, and it takes a community to take on his hand. Okay, so if you want to make the Hand of Ragnaros, Sulfuras in World of Warcraft Vanilla, in Classic, you have to get lucky, first off. It requires the Sulfuron Hammer, which can be crafted by a blacksmith with the help of materials supplied by your guild as you clear the raid. It also requires the Eye of Sulfuras, which has a measly 3.5% drop rate on the final boss, which means once you've gotten to the point where you can clear Molten Core and kill the last boss, on average, you have to do it 28 times before you see a single eye to make one hammer. So yeah, this thing is a little exclusive. The math I calculated out says 28 kills, 28 weeks, so just over 6 months. So if you're lucky, you'll see 2 in a year. And you can do the math if you've got a raid where you raid with 39 other people. Or maybe you're efficient and you do it with 24 other people. You're going to have competition for this item. So even within communities, everyone who wants one of these is not going to get it. And you're going to have those groups of guys who are just so unlucky. Those guys and gals don't ever see an Eye of Ragnaros. It's going to happen. So, okay, let's say you're lucky. And not only does the Eye of Ragnaros drop, but you get it. Well, in order to actually build this into the legendary weapon, the highest DPS two-hander up until the late game content with a cool-ass fiery proc effect, and honestly, it's just status symbol. It's a symbol, and I'm going to talk about what it's a symbol of. So you need to be clearing Molten Core every single week for 6+ months. You need to be a valued member of the group clearing it who gets this item, because rare items like this, legendary drops and Molten Core, are not usually awarded out via the same system that other random loot drops are given. They're usually selected ahead of time by guild officers, or if you're playing in a public group, they're reserved for the people who are actually spending the time to organize the run themselves. And might be the reason, the reward that these people are hoping for to make that run worth doing. I'm not going to talk about GDKP. If you know what GDKP is, good for you. If you don't know what it is, GDKP relies on an economy that is fueled by the current state of Classic, where up to 50% of all accounts are bot accounts, and where there are tons of players violating the terms of service by making real money transactions to buy gold and artificially inflate the cost of everything in the game, in the player economy. I'm just going to pretend that doesn't exist, because that didn't really exist back in the day when this game was designed, the era this game was designed for. And despite all this, despite the mitigating circumstances of what the players have done to this fucking game in 2019, 2020, and 2021, this symbol still retains status through it all. Okay, so if you want to make this, you need to have a blacksmith. The blacksmith, in order to make this hammer, has to do what? You have to make The Sulfuron hammer. The Sulfuron hammer is a pretty good mace, but it's not as it's like a decent raid two-hander, and but it's not really worth the cost just to use it for itself. Now, the only reason you would make the Sulfuron hammer is if you had the eye and we're going to upgrade it to Sulfuras. You can see here it is in its extinguished form, and it takes some stuff that you're going to care about as a guild to actually create this. Number one, 80 Sulfuron ingots. These drop from a boss called Golemag, one of the last bosses of Molten Core. And even though this is an item that's bind on equip, because you need these ingots to make the hammer, most organized groups who are clearing this content are going to hold on to these ingots for themselves. They're not going to be selling them. So your chance of buying these are not high, and if you can buy them, they're going to be expensive. Again, ignoring the fucked up economy of modern WoW Classic. That's not a design problem. That's something else altogether. So this is a 35% chance to drop. You need 8 to make the hammer and a 9th to buy the recipe from the dude at the bar in Black Rock Depths. Oh, it's so flavorful. It's so flavorful. Black Rock Depths is like the front door. It's the Dark Iron Dwarf city that is in front of Molten Core. In fact, literally the entrance to Molten Core is in the back of Black Rock Depths. There's a shortcut you can take and most people are familiar with, but most of us who went there for the first time back in vanilla got there through Black Rock Depths, even accidentally, like, what the fuck have I wandered into? Holy shit. It's mind-blowing. So 35% drop chance off of Golemag for the Sulfuron ingots. You need 8 of them. Let's call it 9. That means you're going to be doing another 20 odd. What's the math? I wrote down for 8, you need 23 kills, 23 weeks. So this syncs up roughly with the drop chance of the Eye Sulfuras. Pretty cool. Dark Iron bars can only be smelted to the Dark Iron Forge in Black Rock Depths. And they're gathered from Black Rock Depths, Molten Core, and Searing Gorge, all in that area of the world. Ooh, that theming is so strong and thick. I love it. I love it. This is the game telling you that the world is important. You should pay attention to the world. Where stuff comes from matters. I love this flavoring. What else? Arcanite bars. You need 50 of these. So this is a cool item. It uses an arcane crystal as one of its reagents. Arcane crystals are highly valued, not least which because they are required for the Crusader enchant, which is highly desired for all melee DPS, which is, of course, the king of Classic World of Warcraft. And people are going to be getting the Crusader enchant not just once in a while, but whenever they get an upgrade, whenever they min-max. Arcane crystals are in high demand, and a lot of botting that goes on is to farm these fucking things. So anyway, but why else should we care about this? Well, in order to transmute the Arcanite, you need to have someone who's dedicated to do this once a day. So on a once-a-day cooldown, you need 50 days in order to actually be making in order to make 50 Arcanite bars. And it's the alchemy profession. So you have the blacksmithing profession to make the hammer. You have the alchemy profession to transmit the Arcanite. And yes, people can just sell this stuff in the free market. It's all BOE. But if you're working as part of a player group to make Sulfuras, probably you people inside the guild who are doing this as a guild service. This is one of the things I loved about old school World of Warcraft. Everything pointed to the world and to each other. The game wanted you to engage with your fellow WoW player. I just love that. Oh, and the rest are less interesting. Essence of Fire. These drop from high-level fire elementals throughout the world. Blood of the Mountain, I think, is a rare drop from the Dark Iron mining node, which again is in Searing Gorge, Molten Core, Black Rock Depths. Lava cores and fiery cores drop from mobs inside of Molten Core. So, like the Sulfuron ingots, you could technically buy these and sell these, but mostly guilds who are running this over time are going to be holding on to these materials so they can make their own Sulfuras hammers when needed. And they don't just go into Sulfuras. There are other things that you care about that lava cores and fiery cores are used for. This is just kind of the outlier, the big sexy, if you will. Anyway, once you have all these materials, you got to truck them over to a blacksmith who has the recipe that he bought at the Black Rock Depths bar by exchanging a Sulfuron ingot to get it. and truck it over to the Black Forge in Black Rock Depths. You make it, and then that gets traded to the person who has Eye of Sulfuras. And then you make it. And boom, you're a legend. And having this weapon back in the day was actually legendary. It was not common. Most people didn't clear Molten Core in vanilla World of Warcraft. I know that's different today. You got to realize that World of Warcraft was designed during an era where the power of social media and sharing and connection didn't hold a candle to what we have today. For the most part, people who played World of Warcraft in 2004 and 2005 and 2006, their only way to get information was by logging into the game and contending with the world directly. Or if they played with a guild, maybe they had like a TeamSpeak server they could talk to people with. The guilds really were the centers of information. And given that each guild did its own thing, that could be imperfect, and it made the world feel bigger and more challenging to deal with because you didn't have these professional content creators who are making guides and showing you everything. There was no streaming. God damn, that changes everything. Okay, so then what does Sulfuras symbolize? I promise us to talk about symbols. To me, Sulfuras symbolizes a community. It takes a village to make this. It symbolizes the value of cooperation and teamwork and the stories you make along the way to getting the Sulfuron ingots, to getting that single fucking drop off of Ragnaros for the eye, to hoarding all these materials, to dragging your party to Blackrock Depths to do all the forging and smithing, to dealing with the daily cooldowns, and like all these little bits of friction create a moment for a player story to happen, for a community to have value. I've said before that communities come together to solve problems that are too big for individuals to solve, and Sulfuras is a problem that's too big for an individual to solve in World of Warcraft Vanilla, and even in World of Warcraft Classic. And to me, it symbolizes what's best about World of Warcraft, which is coming together to do big things and take on these challenges. I know I'm repeating myself, but I think this is so important. Okay. I think that's what I have to say about Sulfuras for now. Let's talk about the other symbol that's on my docket for tonight. Sunrise. Legendary greatsword, first generation in Guild Wars 2. I think maybe one of the most beautiful weapons in all of MMORPG gaming. Check this out. Yeah, it's got a cool like golden hilt. It's pretty, but the blade is like this window into this cool world with this sunset skyline. Check that out. That's the actual attack animation. It is gorgeous. And in many ways, it symbolizes the art style of Guild Wars 2, this painterly art style, and is such an attractive weapon and so iconic within the Guild Wars franchise that to me, I think it serves as a great symbol for what Guild Wars really values in terms of player experiences. And I'm going to talk through what I think those are. So we just talked about Sulfuras and the kinds of experiences that making Sulfuras drives players to do. Those behaviors create the symbolism of the item. And when you see the item in the world, you know, oh, this person had to do X, Y, and Z to get this item. Seeing this means this. I like the item, so I should like that process. That's what there is to like about the game. High status things for high status men and women. So what does Sunrise require? Well, the story is not as simple as is with Sulfuras. I'm going to try to make it as simple as I possibly can. So there's no cool lore that's like central to some part of the world that Sunrise is made in. Rather, Sunrise is made the same way all legendaries in Guild Wars 2 are made. at the Mystic Forge. See if I can picture a Mystic Forge. The Mystic Forge. Here we go. The Mystic Forge is just a random pool of magic that sits in one of the major cities. You chuck items in and you get something out. Basically, it's a crafting interface. It doesn't require any training, and there are no recipes for it. So it encourages you to throw things in and see what comes out. In order to know the recipe for sunrise, you aren't going to a dude in a bar in a dungeon. You aren't getting a drop off of a raid boss. No, you're just throwing shit into the Mystic Forge and seeing what comes out. And eventually the community will find out what the recipe is by trial and error, and they'll post it on the wiki. So you're going to the community wiki to learn about how to make this weapon, which is what I did to research this particular talk. So there are 4 things you need to craft Sunrise. 2 of them are unique to Sunrise, and 2 of them are common across many legendary items in World of Warcraft. Sorry, Guild Wars 2. Rinse, 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 Guild Wars 2. Let's talk about them one by one. First, let's start with the boring stuff. Gift of Fortune. The Gift of Fortune is one of 3 gifts that's necessary in order to craft Sunrise. And what is it? It's a bunch of materials and 2 other gifts that are themselves more materials. Roughly, it's 1,000 gold in materials and like 500,000 karma and 141 spirit shards. If you're playing the game actively, the karma and spirit shards are not a big deal. The gold may be something you need to farm for. I did a little bit of research before this to figure out what a gold per hour rate would be that would be reasonable for farming. I couldn't really find a good one, but the last time I looked, about 20 gold an hour is a pretty conservative estimate of what a person can farm in Guild Wars 2, just kind of doing lazy, popular farming techniques. So about 1,000 gold, 20 gold an hour, that's 50 hours of farming by an individual with no cooperation required. The karma is rewarded for doing events out in the world individually. No cooperation necessary. Spirit shards are rewarded for completing the experience track post level 80. So just anything that gets you experience. Again, no cooperation required. The Gift of Fortune is just telling you to get out and play the game, do whatever you want. Next, we have the Gift of Mastery. This is a little more interesting. So the Gift of Mastery requires another 200 Spirit Shards. So that's basically leveling up from 79 to 80 200 times, which sounds like a lot, but if you play the game actively, it's not a lot. Over 100 hours of farming, or 50 hours of farming, you're going to do that easily. Another 500,000 karma. Again, if you're playing the game actively, 1 million karma, it adds up pretty quick. The Gift of Exploration. 2 of these are awarded every single time a character of yours completes every single location on the map of Tyria in the core game. So every single time you have a character that explores the entire world, you can make up to 2 Gift of Masteries via these Gifts of Exploration. Hey, Young, how's it going? The Gift of Battle is rewarded for playing the World versus World game mode. And because this gift requires you to go out and do some time-consuming stuff, like world exploration, which I think with mounts can be done in something like 5 to 15 hours, depending on how fast you are, and the World v. World track, which I think is about the same, like roughly 10 to 15 hours, if you're efficient. There are actually schemes that exist where people out there with a lot of resources will essentially pay other players for their gifts of mastery, or GOMs as they're called. I'm doing good, Young. We're having a little bit of a thought experiment here about the power of symbols and legendary weapons in World of Warcraft and Guild Wars 2. So that's half of the equation for making the legendary Sunrise, which again is gorgeous. We love it. It's beautiful. So these are, again, the general things. You have to do these for almost every single legendary you make in Guild Wars 2. They're not unique. It's just play the game, do stuff. As opposed to something like Sulfuras, which requires you to do very specific things in very specific locations and is very tied down to a part of the world and encourages group play. This is much more like do it at your own pace, whatever you want. So the next thing we need to make Sunrise is going to be the Gift of Sunrise, which is custom. Sunrise itself. What's this actually going to require? Well, honestly, this one's kind of boring too. It requires about 300 golden materials. So if you're going slow, it's like 15 hours of farming. It requires you to do a few runs of the Ascalonian Catacombs dungeon. And it requires you have a character on your account with armor smithing and weapon smithing. Have the two professions covered in various places. It's unique, but it's not interesting. Again, the materials you're getting are not unique to this sword. They're not unique to a part of the world. They don't require you to do anything specific or interesting. Just playing the game. The most interesting thing about the Gift of Sunrise is Ascalonian Catacombs, but there's no clear thematic link between Sunrise and the Ascalonian Catacombs dungeon. This seems arbitrary to me. So the last thing you need after the Gift of Sunrise, the Gift of Mastery, and the Gift of Fortune to make Sunrise is the most interesting part of it, the precursor weapon. So what is a precursor? Glad you asked. Precursor weapons are like extinguished versions of the legendary weapon. They're less cool looking, they're a little less powerful, but you can upgrade them with these gifts to the legendary version. It's kind of like the Sulfuron hammer to Sulfuras. Very similar in that way. But unlike the Sulfuron hammer, which requires you to engage with a specific part of the world and do some group play and raiding, Sunrise can be... The precursor for Sunrise, which is called Dawn, can be acquired in many different ways. And I'm going to talk through each of them briefly. The first, and I think the most interesting, is actually what I did. My wife and I actually went on this journey together back in 2016. Up until 2015, the only way to get legendary weapons was one of the methods I'm going to describe here in a few minutes. But when the Heart of Thorns expansion, they introduced these legendary journeys that would allow you to work towards and progress a precursor weapon, which is honestly, it's pretty cool. And it's the closest thing we get to a legendary feeling path for these symbolic weapons. I don't have anything to show off for this, but let's just talk through it. So, in order to make Dawn, the precursor, what you have to do is go to a dude in the main city and buy these books. And the books will unlock a collection. The collection, when you complete the collection, will allow you to progress to the next book, which will allow you to it'll unlock recipes to make versions of the precursor that are closer to fully baked, essentially. And the collections are Sunrise 1, 2, and 3. Sunrise 1 has you doing what? Well, first off, there's some actual lore text. Oh, finally, some lore for this legendary weapon. What's it say? Tyria is a land filled with peoples worth protecting. Defend the innocent, rescue the threatened, and consider your role as a hero in order to take your first steps in creating the legendary precursor, Dawn. Okay, so protect things and be a hero. Cool. In order to actually progress as this achievement, what it has you doing is taking on world bosses, which you do with big zergs of strangers in Guild Wars 2, and doing events out in the world where you're helping people. These are thematically consistent with the Protector theme, and can be done in a day if you really want to They're pretty trivial. The one exception to this is there are two items in this collection that require you to engage with fractals, which is the scaling dungeon system of Guild Wars 2. Um, and that's something that's going to require you to play in up to a 5-man group, and will require a little bit of thinking and communication. So this is good. I like that it's actually requiring you to do a little bit of group play. Nothing else so far has required any sort of cooperation whatsoever. Other than Ascalonian Catacombs, I guess. So once you've done Sunrise 1, you can go to Sunrise 2, the lore text. Your first attempt at crafting the legendary precursor Dawn has been modestly successful, but has not yet yielded the weapon you ultimately desire. This journey has only just begun. Find a teacher, research your procedures, and hone your skills before you try a second time. So you notice that the very first part of this journey to make Dawn, the precursor, didn't require any grinding or material investment. It was just going out and doing events. It's pretty fun, actually. This is the answer to that. This is this is when my wife and I did it, required the most time for us. Sunrise 1 and Sunrise 3, we bopped right through. Sunrise 2, we got stuck on. It required us to grind out what today is about 370 golden materials. And it required us to grind out map-specific materials from the Silver Wastes, Dry Top, South Sun Cove. Also, if you're doing this today, Ember Bay would be an option, as well as fractals. We had to go out and play all those maps. This is actually kind of cool. I kind of like this. Again, I like when rewards in the world are tied to certain places. But what about the Silver Waste, Dry Top, and South Sun Cove and fractals actually are related to this weapon? The only connective tissue that these maps have, as far as I can tell, is that they were things that were added to the game post-release. So they weren't there when it launched. They were all part of the Living World Season 1 era of Guild Wars 2. So the theming is not very strong. Not like Black Rock Depths and the Black Anvil strong, that's for sure. Anyway, once you get through this, you have Sunrise 3. Sunrise 3. A shining light of a new day reveals all and banishes the darkness to the deeper haunts of Tyria. Use your crafted illuminator, very cool, to gather the light throughout the land in your journey to create the legendary precursor known as Dawn. This was my favorite part of this journey. What it had you doing was taking this item in your inventory and going to parts of the world where there were little lights. Cool little symbolism, right? Sunrise, light. And using this illuminator to capture the light. There are 27 solo interactions you have to do at various places around the world where you require no help to get there. And there are 6 interactions within the fractals that you're going to need a party of up to 5 players to take on. And because there's a lot, it just takes a little bit of time. But I found this pretty fun. And this to me is the strongest, most connected part of this whole journey to make Sunrise. And once you go through that, you have Dawn, the precursor. Now, I mentioned before I went down this road that before Heart of Thorns came out, there were other ways to get the precursor. What were those ways? Well, if you were extremely lucky, precursors have a chance to drop anywhere in the whole world. I've actually gotten 2 in my time playing Guild Wars 2, which is extraordinarily lucky. Extraordinarily lucky. I've clocked about 3,300 hours on my account, and 2 precursor drops in that amount of time is I'm given to understand fairly lucky. Neither of them were Dawn, but so I ended up selling them. I think one was the Generation 1 Axe. What was the other one? Gosh, I don't remember. Anyway. And so because you can find these in the world, they can be sold. So one option is rather than going through this whole process, you can just buy Dawn off the player trading post. So in total, if you've crafted Dawn via the collection, you've done 40 solo world events. You've done 8 different fractal runs. You've grinded out the Silver Waste, Dry Top, South Sun Cove, and fractals. And you've bought and contributed almost 400 gold in materials. So how does this stack up against buying on the trading post? Well, today you can buy Sunrise for about 300 gold. So in other words, the collection, which is supposed to be a self-paced way and to offer a convenience for getting this item, is more expensive than just buying it straight up. Okay. So that whole journey I talked about, it's cool. You can do it if you want, but it's strictly to your disadvantage to do so in terms of efficiency. I know, MMO players grind the efficient. What's the word? MMO players will grind the fun out of everything, right? But I actually have sympathy with this approach because I think this is actually an incentives problem. I think saying MMO players will grind the fun out of anything is another way of saying that MMO players will find the thing that they're most well incentivized to do, whether or not it's fun. They're very good at creating efficient outcomes to problems presented by the game. It's up to the game to make sure that navigating those solutions is actually fun. I actually see that comment as less of a comment about gamers and more of a comment about game design, personally. And so when I see this, I think, okay, well, maybe this collection could be updated, or maybe this is actually just a fundamental design problem with the way this is presented. And maybe the value of the legendary is okay to fluctuate below the collection value. In any case, if you see someone who has Dawn, the precursor, or has made the legendary weapon with Dawn, you have no idea if they've gone through this path or not. So even though my wife and I shared this, other people who have Sunrise or Dawn out there, there's no way that I know if they've had this. So you can't look at Sunrise as a symbol of anything that happens in that collection, because you can completely opt out of it. And it gets worse. So let's say you're not lucky enough to get on the trading post. To get it to drop for you, but you still feel unlucky. Your other approach is to go to the Mystic Forge. And what you can do is drop in great swords into the Mystic Forge, and at a roughly 0.1% rate, you will eventually get out a precursor for whatever weapon type you're dropping in. So 4,000 rare great swords on average will produce a single Dawn precursor. The Mystic Forge is a lot more friendly to use than it was back in the day, but people who did this back in the day, I got a lot of respect, because it's a lot of UI clicks and waiting to do this. Not for me, man. I think a lot of times some people who engage with those systems and put in the time to really get their money's worth out of their experience in terms of in-game economy, I think are trading fun for currency. And, if you're willing to make that trade, good on you. But it's one I feel really compelled to chase in games like this. But anyway. So those are the ways you can get Dawn. And adding with the 3 gifts, which we talked about, will produce Sunrise. But wait, there's more. Because Sunrise itself, once it's produced, is bind on equip. Which means if you go through this whole process, you can just sell the thing on the trading post. Which means if you want Sunrise, why go through all this process? Why deal with the gifts? Why deal with the Mystic Forge? Why not just grind gold, goes right to the trading post? Last I looked, it was running about 2,100 gold in the trading post. So if you figure 20 gold an hour, that's like 105 hours of grinding. Which sounds miserable. At least it does to me. Some people like to grind, though. More power to them. Okay. So even though there are different ways to get Sunrise, and even though the symbolism is conflicted because of the many different ways, and we don't know what people have done to get this, so it's hard to know what value to place on it, because it really makes the symbol confusing. What is Sunrise standing for? What is it about? What do players have to do to get Sunrise that when you see them wielding this weapon, they're then representing? With Sulfuras, it was group play, right? It was group play and coming together, and I'm going to say also patience. because drop rates are fucking low. But here's the big thing with Guild Wars 2. 2100 gold can be bought in Guild Wars 2 today for about 9400 gems. Because Guild Wars 2 has an in-game currency that can be bought directly for real-world money. What's this equate to? It's about $120. So that means if you don't want to grind in game, you can just buy Sunrise for $120 straight up. I love this greatsword. I think it's beautiful. I use it. But I've resigned myself to the fact that it stands for nothing. It symbolizes nothing. I've told this story in the past. It's a story about an orc warrior named Bogus, who back in my days of playing WoW Vanilla, I used to always see hanging around Orgrimmar, or in Burning Crusade, Shattrath City. Those are the two expansions I was most active in. And he was the main tank of the most progressed Horde guild on that server, a guild called Void. A guild that I joined and cleared most of Naxxramas with in Vanilla, and then said see ya in Burning Crusade. Too toxic, not fun to play with. But this guy always had the best gear, and you could see what he had done. You can see his tier 6 gear. You can see his Hand of Ragnaros. You can see his Thunder Fury. You can see, I think he had the Warglaves at one point too. I don't know. Like, he got a lot of loot. And those symbols of status, of cooperation, of high-end achievement of his guild read loud and clear to me. The PvP achievements he got from the PvP gear. I think that symbols in a virtual world are important. And I think that the incentives that drive pursuit of those symbols help create a meaning for these symbols that when someone bears that symbol, then reflects on that player and we see in ourselves. And when I see this bad boy, how many clicks? I shouldn't have closed this. When I see this bad boy, I see 6 months of Molten Core. I see traipsing through Blackrock Depths. I see player stories that I know happened. And that to me is a world. That to me is a virtual world. And when I see Sunrise, all I see are dollar signs, man. And that makes me fucking sad. That's it. That's the talk. What do y'all think?